Hello, and welcome to Night Clerk Radio. This episode 102, Dec-Affe-Inated Records. Little hyphens in there instead of just...
You're such a literalist. It's goddamn English, Mike.
Well, it's the intent of the author. That's what matters. Only them.
Okay, you're right. Sorry, I'm already derailed you. Dec-Affe-Inated Records.
Yeah, we're continuing Record Label Month. You know, last episode was Ill-Advised Records. Now it's Dec-Affe-Inated Records. This is a Japanese record label that focuses on plunderphonics, arbor beats, signal wave in there. They're quite prolific, dozens of albums over the last couple of years. And before your heart burns out and refuses every sound, norip-e, the philosopher, and his private label, using many aliases and more. Alternative, attitude, hip-hop, vaporwave, feelings of sadness and melancholy. And yeah, this is your choice.
Hi, yeah, that's right. Hi, Burke here. See, Ross, we got you being all unprofessional. You didn't do your introduction because I distracted you.
I know.
Now you've been tainted by my non-professional broadcasting approach. But yeah, so this was recommended way back when we did the J Signal Wave album. And I asked Naoko Ed for some recommendations because she knows a lot more about the scene than we do. One of these albums was one that was recommended. And it was unfortunately like too short to be one of the two albums because it was just a bunch of like 30-second tracks. It wouldn't have been like much of a discussion if it was one of the two albums we picked. So instead, I sort of, filed it away and was like, well, we'll get around to doing this whole, label when we get a chance. And this is our chance. So yeah, so it's interesting because it is a private label. So it is one person largely doing everything, who I think just goes by Scott because one of the aliases is MNG Scott along with others. And yeah, I guess I picked it because a rejection of like label purity, like a record label can be one person. It doesn't have to be a whole stable of artists. So that was the one thing. I don't know if there'd be any objection to doing functionally, an artist profile via their private label for Record Label Month. But Record Label Month is not a real thing, so we can do whatever we want.
It's true. And
the other thing that I thought this was sort of an interesting counterpart to Ill-Advised Records is that it also has a lot of darker theming, right? So, and dark can mean lots of stuff. And that got me thinking about like, well, what does it mean to be, like dark lo-fi? Because dark in the context of Ill-Advised Records was all like
horror,
sincere or like tongue-in-cheek horror, like appeal to horror tropes and horror genre aspects, which of course horror can be, related to personal anxieties or whatever. It's a common source of what people make scary in horror movies. But all of this music is so heavily focused on like the darker side of human emotions. So like loneliness, isolation, depression, doomerism, nihilism. Those are themes across pretty much all of these. Like a lot of these albums are just straight up tagged with depression. One more recent one is called Depression Meals. And I think one of the tags is Doomer Wave.
I mean, there's literally also an album, Doomer Wave, tape volume 1 with the little Doomer meme guy on it.
And for example, for my album, if you translate a lot of the tracks, so like, A Life Not Worth Living, Euthanasia, etc. So I thought it was an interesting artistic outlet. Would you still say it's dark vaporwave? I don't know. It's one of these things that is like why it's silly to apply labels, or whatever, especially to something like so serious. If it's something that they're legitimately processing through music, so I don't want to make light of it. I was just like, this is like this is also dark, but maybe in a more relatable way for some. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
I don't know. Otherwise, like you said, it's very prolific, but it is largely one person doing all of it, which is what's impressive. It's not like a stable of 12 artists or whatever.
Or even the artist and like one or two friends or whatever, which is what I see
that's
a lot.
True.
Yeah. A lot of these private record labels are like, hey, it's me and my friends and we're all going to do albums and I'll do all the work of getting them up and I'll run the record label. Yeah. But this a one person show, huh?
Yep. And they also use it to like, repost or offer another avenue if they were involved in compilations. I noticed because some of the music was like, artists of Vaporwave Volume 2 and stuff, or like Bandcamp Friday compilations that they were on. So it's also a way to re-release a lot of that.
Nice. Yeah. And just looking at the album art covers, there's a huge variety of like styles that this artist is. Like, I mean, I haven't listened to all the music because there's so much of it, but like, given the amount of variety of album art covers, there's some that are very barber beats, you know, like the high plundered one, and some are just like look very reminiscent of like signal wave things, just taken from a screenshot of a CRT, you know, like TV show or something. And some look more like classic vaporwave, like DJ Chop and Screws stuff. So yeah, I wonder if a lot, like, I always wonder, like, musicians that they take on multiple aliases. It seems to be like, for this genre, I'm this person. For this genre, I'm using this name. And like, and it seems to be the case here. Like,
which is interesting since it's all being released kind of in one place, because I do think that sort of genre anxiety is one of the drivers, because you see a lot of people are like, I know I mentioned this before, where they're like, oh, you know, I really do a lot of future funk, but I really want to get into like classic vaporwave, but I'm known as like a future funk artist. So do I just release it? Do I make a new name for it? Do I just not do it? It's like, you should definitely do it. And, you know, whether or not a name, you know, can help people to separate out what they do. Hey, even Garth Brooks had to make Chris Gaines, right?
I mean, yeah, we could do, an artist could do worse than imitating that level of success.
That is true.
Yeah. And again, I'm always interested to see like artists from other cultures create vaporwave or vaporwave adjacent music, because again, like their frame of reference is similar but not identical to like what I'm familiar with personally. So like it's just getting that peek into another perspective, and these albums are great examples of that.
Yeah. So I think we should just probably get into the music then.
Yep. That was a sample from track 2 of Bombing Fate by Winter Blues.
I think it's the other way around.
Oh, Winter Blues by Bombing Fate.
Yeah.
Okay. And the track title is Malfunction. Of course, this is all in Japanese. And yeah, this is sort of a winter themed jazz plunderphonics barber beats with some signal wave influence in there album. It's a very eclectic album. Like, there's something really interesting and different for every single track. And I could not have predicted this journey that we go on in like 31 minutes. And I quite like it. And so, yeah, this is, again, you know, when you mentioned this label first, you mentioned it was signal wave. And so like, but it's a much more Barber's beat, at least the albums I look through.
Yeah, I totally misunderstood Naoko's original recommendation. I thought it was all signal wave until I went and listened to it. And I was like, oh, well, I was wrong about that.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, this Winter Blues it begins with a lot of like jazz, like some mall softy elements, like a little reverb. Like track 1 reminds me of like kind of Miles Davis, that 1950s, 60s era kind of jazz. And then we get into, you know, track 2, which is like this Sega fucking outrun music, just fucking roaring in there. And it's great. I love it. But every single track has a very distinct sound to it. And again, this is the peek into a perspective I'm not familiar with. Like, I really want to understand, like, it's a mystery. Like, it clearly makes sense to the artist, like why they pick these samples and how they arrange them and everything. But like, what is going on here? Like, I know jazz has a different level of influence in Japan than in the United States. It's jazz you hear a lot, commercials and television from what I've seen in Japan. And it's more, you know, classy and like sophisticated and elegant.
Kind of. I mean, they had like a really fun like jazz fusion phase through like the 70s and 80s. Not too dissimilar from over here. Most famously being like that Cassiopeia era.
Yeah. But like jazz is almost more of a niche thing here in the United States. Like it's not, it's not nearly as popular. It's not something you hear as much in a mainstream sense. Like obviously jazz still exists and there's a huge amount of it being made and listened to, but like it's not at that mainstream level that say like rock or like or even classical music is in the United States. So yeah, I think this is sort of a reflection of that like in winter, that's the Christmas shopping season, department stores and other things are advertising, you gotta like have it. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating here. I just really am fascinated with this kind of compilation or this album. So.
Yeah, I think what occurred to me, and this is probably some like recency bias or something, but a lot of these albums we've been listening to, and I think they also just stand out because they're ones I really enjoy. So I remember them, are these like crazy eclectic blend of genres. We had like the iClick album and stuff on we did a couple episodes ago on the Utopia District best of episode, where it's like, oh, there's a little bit of jazz, there's like a little bit of breaks, there's like a little bit of like classic vaporwave, there's video game stuff. It's just like them doing everything that interests them. And I think, to your question of, well, this makes sense to them, how do they decide to arrange this? I don't know. It could be anything from stuff they do to kill time in the winter, right? Winter blues, stuff they see. It could also be as simple as like, these are songs that, evoke winter blues for me as an artist. And I'm just going to put them together in this really interesting way and put out this album. Like the jazz is interesting because, yeah, it is, especially the first track is much more like cool 50s, like you're saying, versus like more loungy jazz later.
Oh, yeah. Like even like track 3.
Yeah.
Like track 3 gave me like a very 70s vibe. Like it's very saccharine.
I think what gives it the 70s vibe for me is the introduction of like synth, more synth, which wasn't really present in like 50s jazz, of course.
Yeah.
So that kind of time. But then like the album continues on, and I love track 4 into track 5. Because track 4 is like the longest track. Not like a fair margin, but some of them are shorter. And it's like this very cool, like romance music. Oh, it's like melancholy, like melancholy romance, just like lots of auxiliary percussion. Like I always think of, I kind of make fun of my head. I say, but it kind of reminds me of like there's a lot of little auxiliary percussion throughout like the Blade Runner soundtrack. There's lots of little like chimes and other stuff. And that comes in, even though the rest of it sounds very different, but then it kicks up into like just jams. I don't know, like 80s ballad jams.
Yeah. Got the horn coming in. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like, you got saxophone ripping it up to the end. And then it ends. It has like a true outro. It has like some outro hits. And then just like hard cuts into like village music. Like in a video game. It reminds me a lot of it's such a basic reference, but I think it has a very similar feel to, was it Cosmo Canyon in FF7, I think?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which is Red 13's home.
Yeah, well, why don't we play that as our second sample? Yeah, no, I totally missed. Yeah, it is a village music. Yeah, now that I think about it, it is a JRPG, nice little idyllic pastoral village, and it's quite fun. Of course, my favorite track has to be the end track 7, because fucking like in your introduction talking about how this is about like depression and sadness and melancholy. Like from both albums, I got a sense the artist here has a great sense of play and experimentation, because the last track is Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas, but let's add some fucking breakcore.
That's right.
Yeah, let's fucking go.
Which is, it's so funny because like track 6. So track 5 is I rescind my Cosmo Canyon reference. I think that's incorrect, but I stand by like JRPG Town music. Then track 6 is a Winter's Blues edit of a different song. And that's like chill hop almost. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like a lo-fi.
I like the little shaker in
chill wave type. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then it comes up, and I got worried because there's a Santa emoji in the track title.
it's a threatening.
It's like Christmas gifts. Yeah, it's very threatening because I know she's out there. And in like the first 5 seconds as that vocal comes in, I was like, and then it turns into like lo-fi AM radio breaks of All I Want for Christmas Is You.
Yeah.
So I guess this is my fault because I made jokes about doing Halloween in April last episode.
Yeah,
so
we're hitting all the big holidays. Yeah.
Karm has now hit me with Christmas. And All I Want for Said Christmas Is You.
Yeah. I would not have predicted that as the ending for this album especially like the first 2 tracks.
I mean, I get the appeal. Like it's such a fun tongue-in-cheek song. Which does come up in a lot of Christmas, but like when did this album
came out? December.
Last December.
Yeah.
Okay, so it makes sense. It's a winter album. I don't know. I thought it'd be extra fucked up if they released it in like August, but just call it Winter Blues.
Yeah, just be brave
and have Christmas music in it just to really throw people off.
But yeah, it's a fun album. Lots of interesting changes, and I've been listening to a lot of Barber Beats lately, and I have noticed more jazz in Barber Beats albums than lately. Maybe that's just my recency bias, but like, I do like that trend, and I do like, again, this different perspective. So yeah, it's a fun little album, and again, unlike most Barber Beats albums, this album just does not give a shit about the previous tracks. Like every track is unique and interesting and different. It's pretty fun.
Absolutely. A bit from track 2, A Life Not Worth Living, off our second album, Norip-e the Plundered by Norip-e the Philosopher, which is, I believe, another alias of Scott in Nagoya. And this one is interesting because it came out earlier in the year compared to yours. It came out in March of 2023, but it feels like after listening to there's like a little bit of groundwork for your album here, where there's a lot of, it's very plunderphonics driven. Obviously, the title is The Plundered. A lot of use of various genres. There's a lot of funk, there's a lot of jazz, there's a lot of more classic poppy sounding stuff, or more ambient, like down tempo stuff. I'd say it's tagged as rebel music and prison beats, which I also think is interesting. I don't know. I'd have to go translate every song title to see if that comes up somewhere, or like look into the samples a bit more, or if they got in trouble for like plunderphonics and decided to say, fuck it, I'm going to release yet another plunderphonics album. But overall, again, I really, really like this. And I want to think about this in terms of like artist progression, I guess would be how I'd phrase it, because since this has come out, they've released a lot. And the last 10, maybe 15 have been predominantly through the Bomb the Fate or Bombing Fate, whatever's the more correct translation of that artist name. So I wonder if they just sort of did this and had fun with it and like fell in love with this eclectic genre blend plunderphonics approach. And that's sort of where the Bomb the Fate project came out of. and became kind of more interesting or seductive to do, because before this, there's a lot of stuff through like High Plundered. There's one, as Nerby called Nobody Cuts My Hair. I don't know if that's a haircuts for men.
It's gotta be.
It has to be, right?
Yeah,
it has to be, right?
Yeah.
Reference. And then there's even some stuff that is like much more hip hop focused and has lyrics before. Or,
Interesting.
Like, there's some stuff like Kanye Far East, Dearmer Wave. If you go, much deeper scroll. Yeah, it's like, well, nobody calls me Scott, but I'm Scott. If you know, you know. Sorry, Scott. I've been doing it this whole episode. But yeah, I would just like to. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, I should just go talk to the artist and ask them all these questions. But,
what's the deal? Yeah,
I just want to know. I'm just curious, not like how they think about that stuff and what the progression is. Because I just feel like there's a lot of the same kind of jazz roots throughout this album.
Yeah, jazz, but like for me, when I was listening, what it reminded me was actually DJ Shadow is one of my favorite artists, and I've listened to a lot of his stuff, including a lot of his more experimental B-side stuff, where he's really focusing on creating interesting beats. And like, I just got the same kind of vibe of like this person, a lot of experimentation, a lot of play with different types of beat structures. And like, so like, one of the tags on here is trip hop. And like, yes, it's that's true. Yeah. A lot of it's very sparse, but like very focused on developing different kinds of rhythms with, drum machines or drum loops and that kind of thing. And it's kind of like just seeing the artist at work trying to go through this and figure out what they like and what they don't like. And it's some, real interesting beats. Like, I would not be surprised if like, norip-e took the best stuff from this album and started incorporating the other ones.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It's again, just speculating, of course, only they know.
Yeah.
For sure.
But
yeah, there's, I guess that's true, because even though we did call the other album like more eclectic or whatever, it was, I guess, I don't know how to phrase this because it's not a criticism, but I do feel like this album is much, much longer and experimenting with many, many more ideas.
100%.
So, maybe that's something, because there are like track 4, for example, which is like straight up. I'm not going to play a sample from it, but it is like straight up much more of like ambient. It's called, track 4, One Who Speaks in Tongues. It is much more like dark ambient, almost. It's like this kind of like chanting or like windscape and more drone, darker piano. But then there's like drums cut through and stuff later in the track. So stuff like that stands out to me. There's also play a sample from track 20, Funky Session by Nagoyan Prince. So this track, aside from having a great track title, it does live up. It's got a lot of like really cool bass. It's 12 minutes long, so it has like a lot of room to play with all of its ideas. I would say it does go from like just bass, just like slap bass throughout. There's little horns here and there, comes in and out. It's like almost like approaching like a bass solo towards the end. And that's like a really interesting 12 minutes of music against, the same album that also has, tracks that are a few minutes of just like ambience and noise with drums over them. So I just love the experimentation, and I personally am like very forgiving of artistic experimentation. I think that's so much more interesting than just doing more of the same. Like, I love when artists try new stuff or try new genres, or like push themselves to do visuals in a different way or whatever. So I think overall the journey of working through this album of ideas, under whatever circumstances, it's still tagged as depression. I don't know if they just do that because it doesn't feel as connected.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess obviously like the tone, that kind of ambient can be very melancholy, but it's not like outright. Okay, the titles are also pretty on the darker side, so I should, I guess, acknowledge that.
Yeah. No, I mean, we should mention this is like an hour 38. This is a double.
It's a journey.
It's an odyssey even. Yeah, but there's, like you mentioned, ambient elements. There's some hints of like Mallsoft I got through it. Some of the, some added reverb or sense of space. And you mentioned, there's a lot of experimentation. I like these just abrupt shifts. And it's like, okay, this is interesting. I like this. And it even right before that, it gets like, gets kind of funky. Like, there's a lot on this album, but like a lot of it is dominated by these interesting experiments and loops and beats. And I want to say like, a lot of it's also guitar focused too. There's a lot of guitar music, and so I wonder if that was sampled, or if like norip-e was playing that and adding in the samples. Like, I'd be really interested to learn more about his artistic process.
Yeah, that's true. I sort of had assumed that everything was plunderphonics just because of the album title, The Plundered. But I mean, there's no reason, even in plunderphonics, it's extremely common to punch up or modify or add other elements that you play yourself. So I don't, that would be interesting if they're also contributing. Yeah,
because the guitar was such a constant throughout the album. It comes up so many times that like, I wonder if that's the one instrument they play and they like, added the drums to it, or taking samples and mashing them up, or I don't know. It's again this sort of like, sometimes you see a piece of art, you're like, you don't know the story of it, so it's fascinating to you, but you're not getting what the artist intended, because there's just you don't have all the information needed to understand. So it's like, oh, interesting, but like what's the deal?
But it's, I don't know, I kind of like that freedom to then kind of like think about it on your own. With the understanding that you don't have perfect information, you don't know everything that means everything to them for whatever reason. But it still is like, I don't know, like just really, really an interesting listen. It makes me want to go back. Like if I had time, it's like maybe like a long-term project, like really listen like detail from like different periods of time and see what was going on.
Oh yeah. There are
to see like if this does like progress into like a more plunderphonics focus, or if they've always done that. I don't know. I mean, one of the other aliases was, I think, like high plundered. So probably, I think, has always been a key part of what they do, just as part of the scene and part of vaporwave. But I'm curious to see like how that's shifted, because there's just such an interesting set of ideas on this album. And then, like I said, I feel like they're kind of like further refined on your album, which came out, 9 months later or whatever. And, they still have stuff to this day, where I think the last album was, February of this year. Yeah. I just love when I find new artists to kind of dig into and see what they're up to.
Yeah.
So I think you all out there should also check out, if you're into this type of music, check out what they do.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We like shining a light on new record labels that are doing the good work. Hopefully you found something this month, like not just these particular albums, but like go through the catalogs of these record labels and like see what else appeals to you. Because a good record label like curates a type of music, and if it clicks with you, then hey, you found a gold mine. You found all the music you need for a while. So
that's right.
Yeah. But next month, next episode, really, we're going to be looking at some new music. And what that is, well, that's a mystery for you, the listener. You'll have to listen to find out. But we, of course, if you aren't a patron, if you would like to keep this podcast going, help us Keep going. Patreon.com/nightclerkradio. We have a bonus episode every month for our patrons. We also have a lovely Discord community where we share links and talk about episodes and other related topics. And we are, of course, on the social media platforms for Night Clerk Radio. I am at Ross Payton, and Burke is at Burke McBurkinson. And we're on Blue Sky too. And I do Facebook occasionally. And we have our own website when I remember to post links, because there's no way to automate that for some dumb reason. But yeah, nightclerkradio.com. Please rate and review us on Apple, Spotify, whatever you listen to podcasts on, and tell your friends and your frenemies and your enemies. You could do an enemies to friends. Maybe this podcast will breach that distance between the two of you, and you can become best friends.
Right. Yeah. No one talks about the enemies to friends pipeline.
No one does outside of AO3.
No one does.
And the people need to know, Burke. But anyways, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.